Recently in Bangalore, at the Cubbon Park, a group called Cubbon Reads, which basically goes and reads books. They were detained. Some of them were detained and their books confiscated because the horticulture department said that it is a secret Santa exchange and so many people cannot come together to Cubbon Park without permission. This is a problem across cities in India, I feel. We have very few public spaces that people can access. And when they can access, there are all kinds of bizarre ad hoc rules where you can't touch each other. You can't bring, what is it? In Cubbon Park, they said you cannot bring dogs that bark. You cannot eat food at one time. You cannot hold hands. They try to bring that rule. So, Vinay, you work a lot for access to public spaces, right? Is the problem becoming more acute in a city like Bengaluru?
The problem is definitely becoming more acute, because population has really grown, but the public spaces have not grown to that extent. So if you go to Lalbagh, for example, in the morning, even if you go at like 6:30 on a weekend, it feels like majestic, right, on the walking tracks, because there's like that many people there. So there is a lot of people, and it's only a small subset of people who are actually coming to public spaces. But on the one side, that is there. On the other side, we've had too much state regulation of public spaces in the last few years, right? It's almost like it's the WhatsApp uncles who are deciding what has to happen in a park. Like we have parks in Bangalore. Somebody put it up on Twitter the other day which said you can't walk anti-clockwise.
What?
And you can't walk you have to walk only clockwise. And we've had rules like
But why are people walking anti-clockwise?
no. When you
Being
enter a
walking
park, you can
reverse.
turn. No. When you enter a park, you can turn left and go around, or you can turn
Oh.
right and go around. So they mean like turn left and like
Not
go.
that they're walking reverse.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not just about Cubbon Reads and what happened. Definitely, what happened with Cubbon Reads, it's wrong that the department came and confiscated when such a rule was not communicated, and whatever talk was fine and all that was there. That's like really high-handedness for somebody using a public space for something as innocuous as like reading or exchanging a book. But the problem is of overall public spaces in Bangalore. And if you look at parks, there have been several issues. One, parks have been getting closed. Right. So my mother goes for walking near a park near my house, and the last few days she's walking in the compound at home, because even though DK Shivakumar, who's the Bangalore district in charge minister, has ordered that the parks be open, the two parks near my house in Jayanagar 40 block, they're locked. They open at 4:35, and it's not convenient for her. And there are several people for whom this happens. Even now, if you go to parks in the city, if you go around 3:30, you'll see college students and others sitting on that compound edge. And that edge also, now they made it such that like there's only this much space. You can't even like sit properly. Yeah. So there is a large problem where there's increased state regulation of public spaces, which suits only a certain mindset, right? Of a certain middle class, like a certain majoritarian mindset, which says like couples can't hold hands and they'll do something, and like, they'll start making out and it makes us uncomfortable. You cannot eat in the park. But if you can't eat in a public space, what happens, right? And Cubbon Park, you must also know, is a place where street vendors have been banned. So on Sundays, they close traffic, correct? So if you go somewhere deep inside the park, like near the library, and if you feel hungry, you have to walk a long distance to come out.
And clockwise.
Yeah. You have to walk a long distance to come out. So they've actually banned street vendors. So I don't know if you remember, there's this old lady opposite MS building who was using that solar panel for like making joda. She was inside Cubbon Park near the library. But all of them have been thrown out, right? So there is a problem of over-regulation of public spaces, and the state is increasingly seeing, what can happen, what can't happen. So from Bahutwa, Karnataka, we've been organizing something called Kuta at Cubbon for the last 2 years, where the first Sunday of every month, it was an open call to people to come there to do, say, something like clay modeling on the theme of democracy, or like to do this image theater, which is a silent theater on a theme of fraternity. Or there was one kuta where like people got recipes and just exchanged it. But one particular kuta was around Gauri Lankesh's death anniversary to discuss her writings, some particular writings, to discuss it. Cubbon Park police came there. And said, you have to come back to the station. You have to do this in Freedom Park. And so both the kuta members said, why should we go to Freedom Park? We're discussing a book. And they said, no, you can't discuss it. We are afraid that somebody is going to come and do something to you. We are concerned for you. So therefore you come to the police station now, and like henceforth if you're going to do something like this, you have to take our permission. So it's not just the horticulture department, but the Cubbon Park police also said that. And there were some other student groups who had organized some other discussion there in Cubbon Park, and for which if there is a poster on social media, then Cubbon Park police springs up.
But in all other parks, you cannot sit, like a group cannot gather, right, for any such causes to discuss or anything. They'll come and stop you anyways. They'll come and ask
That's
you.
what I'm saying. There's like too much of state regulation which is happening in all parks, and it's a regulation of all kinds of things, right? And the problem you also see that, Bangalore has very few playgrounds.
Yeah.
The number of playgrounds in Bangalore are shrinking. Parks are increasing, but in the park you cannot play. There is no playground. There is a park, but even if you do something simple like throwing a frisbee or something like that, they'll say you cannot do that. Cubbon Park also has a rule that you cannot climb trees. Now there are
You cannot cycle, you cannot use skate, and then you cannot use big cameras. There are all kinds. That's why I don't go to Cubbon Park.
No, but it's a beautiful space. And for those of us who grew up in Bangalore, we have such fond memories, right? And it was a hub for, I love the dog park there. I was almost a stalker. I used to just go and stalk the dogs because they were so adorable. The skating culture.
That's why
in
they
Cubbon
shut
Park.
that dog park for some time. Because you're stalking the dogs.
That's not on me. But, the skating culture there was so beautiful, and it did not hamper anybody. They would pick a lane, they would stick to that lane. It's not like people would get injured or anything like that. But I think primarily there are three problems. One is the lack of space in itself. Vinay can come in on this, but I read somewhere that Bangalore has about 1,200, 1,300 parks in the BBMP limits, compared to Delhi's 14,000 parks. It seems a little too drastic to me, but you can come in on the numbers. One is the lack of space itself. Second is the surveillance in these spaces, right? Like you said, people get, in the afternoon, the reason they close is the people living around the park don't like that students come and hang out there. They loiter there, they make out, and they don't want to see that in front of their house. Close your house doors. I'm sorry. I mean, where
Poor
do you expect,
students. They are the brunt of everybody's
where do
anger.
you go? Where do you go to make out? Coastal cities have beach. Even there,
Pooja has been stalking dogs. Then she's talking about making out in parks. What is the third problem?
I'm saying, this culture of oppression manifests itself in so many ways, right?
Correct.
The third part I want you to come in on is the hostile architecture that we see. Putting spikes, metal spikes, like you mentioned, that curb sort of a thing where you can't sit. So it's like saying that you have to buy your way into a public space. If you want to go to a mall and sit there, you have to pay. If you're poor, you don't have access to public
But
spaces.
Vinay, are there rules that allow the administration to actually do all this kind of things? What are the loopholes that they're using of the law?
So there are 2-3 things. One is in terms of what you said, the architecture. Yeah, if you look at Cubbon Park, if you enter Cubbon Park from near Corporation Circle now, towards the library, you'll see that both sides they put a fence, so you can't enter the park. You have to just keep walking on the road till the library. Like only somewhere in between there's a small opening. It's ridiculous as to why the park has to be fenced like that. And two, in terms of the regulation that you're talking about, see, the law around parks is the Karnataka Parks, Playfields and Open Spaces Act. This is the law which governs parks and playgrounds and the other open spaces. And one of the restrictions is that you cannot put construction in a park which is not for park activities. Like it's okay to put a toilet in Cubbon Park because people who come there, but you cannot say build anything else which is not really suited to a park there. These rules which the horticulture department is quoting is what they told both members also when they went to ask, what is this regulation that is there. And these rules, they seem to have made it up on their own. Now, one problem that we're facing is Cubbon Park is under the horticulture department. Horticulture department is good at horticulture, but Cubbon Park is also public space now, right? So should horticulture department be the one which is like looking at parks, because that is not their experience of public spaces, how to govern public space. A deputy director of horticulture knows how to maintain a botanical garden, how to do that, but they might not know how to regulate public space. So even this rule that they're saying more than 20 you cannot gather, or if it's more than 20 you need permission. Like how do you decide a number? Who decides the number?
And it's
right?
also their morality, I think.
Yeah,
you
it's
can't
definitely
hold hands as some horticulture department decides.
Exactly. So I feel like the urban local body is BBMP. These are all spaces within BBMP. On the one hand, it should be BBMP which is doing regulation. Second thing is there's been no discussion like who framed these rules, who communicated these rules. See, parks are commons. And commons, whether it's parks, beaches, or grazing land, Gomala, etc., commons have to be used by everybody, and commons should not have entry barriers. And how do you use the commons in such a way that the commons can be maintained? It should be a broad democratic decision. But here we don't see democratic decision making. In every place, there are some people who hold power. In the neighborhood parks, it's the resident welfare associations. In Kormangla, I remember going to a park when the RWA person told me to leave at 7:30. He said, I have to lock up. He had the key. BBMP didn't have the key. I don't know why it had to be closed at 7:30, right? And near your office, this park on the other side,
which is called Ganja Park.
Yes, I do.
No, not Ganja Park. The traffic park.
Okay.
The traffic park was handed over to that builder, Vaswani. So they close it at 6. So there Vaswani is holding power. And in certain parks is the Walkers Association. So why should Cubbon Park Walkers Association have so much power? Is walking the only thing to be done in a park? Of course, Walkers Association has also done some good things, but it's almost like, in every park there are certain people or certain structures which are wielding a lot of power, which is like not at all democratic. And that is a broader conversation we need to have. We need to have people of all classes. Like, how did they decide that street vendors should not be inside? Street vendors, it's their livelihood, but they also serve people in the park like me. I would have been very happy to just eat some peanuts. It's not like they were selling something dangerous or like people are littering. There's enough dustbins over there, right? So who's taking these decisions? It's horticulture department. But why is horticulture department trying to regulate a public space without any kind of discussion? And that's the broad discussion we need to have.
Vinay, I'll just go to Hyderabad and Pune people, because what is the situation there, Soumya? You have been living in Pune for quite many years now. So are there enough spaces, commons as we call it there?
We do have parks, but more than that, I would say the hills are where people go to when they really need to, relax, or they don't want to go to a mall or a theater or a coffee space, coffee place. Because in any metro city today, if you want to hang out with friends or go somewhere with your family, these are the only options that we have. Go to a mall, go to a restaurant, or go and watch a film. In Pune, luckily, we do have the hills, which are accessible to the public. We have different entry gates in different areas. And there, the rules are not too bad. Some gates do have rules like you can't take your pet dogs. But then the same hill will have another entry gate which allows pet dogs. So if you walk up the hill, you will see pet dogs there, but you can't take it through this gate. So there are some absurd and inconsistent rules like this. But there is an avenue for people to have access to some kind of public space. And this obviously is open to all kinds of people. It's not only the privileged who have access to these spaces.
Rajeshwari, Hyderabad also, there have been some controversies, right? Where suddenly they'll try to bring a rule, like Osmania University at one time. Like you were saying, Pooja, the joggers park, they tried to introduce a rule where you had to pay money.
They had a monthly pass of 200 rupees, which is not very high, but that's it. Why should anybody have to pay for that? Yeah.
But Hyderabad, do you have a lot of commons, and are there these absurd rules there also?
First of all, Hyderabad doesn't have too many parks. And whichever park, like a botanical garden, for example, there are some places which have been taken over by construction, unfortunately, through some loopholes. And so there, if I can think of from the top of my head, I don't have so many parks to talk about. Maybe there is an NTR garden where families do go in the evenings, which is on the Necklace Road. Then there is the oldest Sanjivaya Park, Indira Park, where people walk, which is definitely the worst maintained park in Hyderabad. And then perhaps the KBR. The KBR is the only park, because it's in Jubilee Hills. A lot of celebrities go there, a lot of ministers go there to walk. So that is the only well-maintained park that I've seen so far. So otherwise, I think parks in Hyderabad have been, there are very less number of parks, there are very less number of places that people can safely go to for walking or for anything for that matter, or meeting or talking or even holding hands is the last thing. Because I think like in every city, the police come cracking down. So even to go relax, maybe read a book or anything, there's no park in Hyderabad.
Sometimes I wonder if cops just were born as cops, right? They were not young people who went to parks. They're always there telling people to get up, move. Didn't you go to parks when you were young? No, Pooja, I also want to just bring about another angle in this whole Bangalore thing, where it is not just about a Cubbon Park, right? That is, of course, commons and place where you can gather. Even to protest, In Bengaluru, you can only protest in Freedom Park. If you are a farmer living in the outskirts of Bengaluru and you want to protest there, you cannot. You have to come all the way to Freedom Park and get permission, right? Which is also ridiculous.
Yeah, so from, we formed this coalition, the Horata the Hakigagi Janandolana. Since the last 1 year, we've been fighting for this, for the right to protest, right? So all this started because the Anganwadi workers, they had a rally 2.5 years ago demanding for higher wages because they were being paid so little. Then a judge of the High Court writes a letter to the then Chief Justice saying that, this rally impacted traffic and, there should be some restrictions on protests and rallies. Then the High Court converts it into a suo motu petition. And while hearing that petition, the High Court passes an interim order saying no rallies, absolutely, and protests should happen only in Freedom Park. As this case is being heard with this interim order in force, the then Bangalore Commissioner in January 2022 brings in a new regulation under the Karnataka Police Act. He brings in a new regulation which says protests can happen only in Freedom Park. Rallies are allowed, but protests can happen only in Freedom Park. If there is a need to protest elsewhere, only the commissioner can approve it. So even though the police have bought this regulation, the police themselves only keep quoting the High Court order still and say that because of the High Court order, you cannot protest anywhere except Freedom Park. They've not allowed the Pride March. They've not allowed May Day rally. They didn't allow farmers to have rally. And there have been like FIRs against people for protesting in places other than Freedom Park, right? And that's absolutely, and see, the thing about this Freedom Park rule is not just about protests. Like I said, it's brought in a certain mentality to Bangalore police, which is why when we're sitting in Cubbon Park and discussing about a book, they're saying go to Freedom Park. Why did you think like that, right? This is nothing. This is not a protest. This is not anything. We are just 7 people sitting and discussing a book. How can you tell us go to Freedom Park? Because the police has decided anything that they feel is inconvenient, you have to go to Freedom Park and do that.
Ironically, it's called Freedom Park.
There was a jail there before, so they're still looking at it as the central
so
jail.
dissent is jailed. And, so we met the chief minister and
But he promised to revoke this.
He promised to revoke it. He said he'll speak to the AG. We met the chief minister twice. We met the additional chief secretary home. We met the police commissioner. But, they keep talking only about traffic, right? But if you sit on the steps of town hall, no traffic is impacted. And when it comes to traffic, Bangalore in 2015 had 11.3 lakh cars. In 2024, there are 23 lakh cars. That is not spoken about traffic. But if 20 people stand at Mysore Bank Circle on the pavement, that becomes a problem for you, right? And so where is the space for expression, right? The constitution says you have the right to freedom of assembly. You have the right to peacefully gather at a place. You have the right to freedom of speech and expression. But like everything is being jailed, right? Dissent is being jailed in Freedom Park. And a party which swears by the constitution, which said the BJP is trying to tear away the constitution. We're there to save it. It's been 1.5 years since they came to power, but they're not lifting this rule, even though it has been brought to their notice umpteen number of times. In fact, DK Shivkumar and Siddaramaiah had an FIR because they protested in a place other than Freedom Park. They went to Supreme Court to get it quashed.
No, also the issue is the very definition and the purpose of a protest is to draw attention to an issue. Yes. Because you're not getting it otherwise. Yes. You also want to take the public along with you. So when you're even in Freedom Park, they've put up these huge walls. So you cannot, even if you're driving by, you can't actually stop and see what the protest is about. How many people will actually park and go and see why Anganwadi workers are protesting? So it defeats the purpose of having a public protest, number one. Number two is, they still allow rallies for political parties. Does that not disrupt traffic? I got caught so many times during Lok Sabha elections. That is allowed. Why is that rule not applicable there?
Not just rallies, but also like religious processions, right? Like they block roads for like religious processions. And
all the time
they block roads for religious processions, and like that is allowed. The streets are again commons, right? The streets are also commons, but they feel the streets have only one purpose, and that is for traffic to move. Streets are multi-purpose. Streets are for trees. Streets are for people to walk. Streets are for public displays of dissent. Streets are for dialogue, right? A protest is nothing but a form of dialogue. It's only when you do a protest that somebody will come to listen to you. Or like Pooja, you were saying that somebody who's passing by will come and say, we've had protests at Mysore Bank and earlier at MG Road when we used to do it, where passerbys have come and asked, what is this about? And they've actually come to know about it. Then they've joined, or like, there has been a discussion, there has been a debate. But that's a dialogue. A protest is a form of dialogue. But, this whole thing is happening because cities in India, it's not just Bangalore, right? Even Hyderabad. In Hyderabad, where they allowed Allu Arjun to go from that metro station to the theatre, protests are not allowed. Indian cities are moving towards a particular vision of a world-class city, which is sanitized, where there's only certain forms of expression which can be allowed in public and certain kinds of activities, right? Now, there is a lot of outrage about Cubbon Reach. It's good there's the outrage. But when the street vendors were evicted from Church Street, they were harassed much more than the people who were come to read the books, right? Their carts were taken away. Their carts are thrown in Mayor Hall. If you go to Mayor Hall now, to the Joint Commissioner East's office, and if you go to that garden, the peanut sellers' carts are just thrown ulta there, right? The corn stands are just like put there, right? They were not given a notice. They were not allowed to say anything, and they're still not being allowed. So Bangalore is going towards a sanitized version of a public space where it's okay to have a big car and park it on the road for free. It's okay to have a big car and keep driving it and get the roads jammed. But God forbid you allow any form of dissent. God forbid you allow street vendors to like vend, or you allow a May Day rally, right?
The point of the street vendors, right? One of the things I've heard a lot of these RWAs mention is that they want the parks closed in the afternoon because street vendors who are tired come and sleep on the park bench, and they have a problem with that even. Just imagine the level of cruelty.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on just the last point on the legal part of how public spaces are to be made available, at least in BBMP and BDA limits, 10% should be allotted for parks. Another additional 15% for civic amenities, right? Civic amenities can be your playground because you said you can't play in the park, right? The problem is these CA sites, civic amenity sites, are given to clubs. Each area now has a club. Now the membership of that club is very high. Obviously, very few people can go. What they do is they give that to those people. So the rest of the people who are poor, who don't have access, don't have a public space in that area. That's why increasingly outer parts of Bengaluru don't have any kind of public space at all.
So before we wrap up, I just have two quick thoughts. And Soumya and Rajeshwari, if you want to have any concluding remarks on this, do jump in. For me, two things which stand out. One is that judges traveling on roads is a very dangerous thing. Look at what happened in Bengaluru. Now we can only protest in Freedom Park. In Chennai, there was a judge who went on the road and saw all those fish stalls and they were removed, right? So judges traveling on roads, dangerous. The second is the media. I've always had this problem with particularly a newspaper, which is there across all cities and a lot of others also. They have this very middle class attitude that street vendors should not be there. So that newspaper will run campaign after campaign after campaign about how to remove street vendors. And then finally, like for example, Church Street street vendors are removed. They will have this triumphant headline, street vendors finally removed. So I feel that the administration has also cultivated the media to propagate this message that street vendors should not be there, that they are a nuisance, they are a hindrance and they should be removed. And that is entrenched in people's minds now. So I think the media also has played a role in this. Soumya, Rajeshwari, any final thoughts, Soumya?
Yes, I agree with you. So when we say public, we tend to think that only we have rights. We meaning a section of the privileged people, that only we have rights and only we should have access to these spaces. And then we think that these spaces should be clean and hygienic, and we assume that if the others come inside, then it will automatically spoil the atmosphere. It will, create some kind of a nuisance. So as Pooja was mentioning, that the RWA has a problem with people sleeping in the park, people who are tired after a long day's work. They see that as a nuisance because of this us and them narrative. So I feel that is very unfortunate, and the media should not play along with something like this.
When you said media, before the Church Street eviction happened, around a month before that, there was an article in a particular newspaper which said Church Street vendors are the cause for garbage and like a lot of problems in Church Street. When I saw that article, I was like, okay, there is an eviction impending because they're trying to build.
No, I have been wanting to do an investigation on this particular newspaper for years now, just tracking how they have, and this is not a Bengaluru phenomenon, Vinay. I have tracked that newspaper in different cities. The moment they write about this particular road is not good, that road contract is given to someone, right? They will say that this fish stall should not come up, vendors should not be there. Immediate demolition. So there is a clear pattern of how that newspaper is behaving across cities.